It's not very often you have a global ambassador for dance music in front of you. Today we do. His name's Pete Tong, and he's bringing the Heritage Orchestra along with Jules Buckley and the brilliant Ibiza Classics to the SSE in November. Very excited about it, Pete.
Yep.
I
Thank you.
mean,
Thanks for having us.
these tracks are just, they're timeless tracks. You supported them right from the very start in your shows. Give us the journey.
It was kind of freakish invitation, really, at the beginning. Someone called me up from Radio 1 in January 2015 and said, would I be interested in curating a prom? The proms were trying to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit for a kind of younger demographic. Proms have been running for over 100 years at Royal Albert Hall, celebrating, orchestral music, classical composition. So I thought, why not? Let's dive in. And my only memory, I wasn't really a proms expert. I have a kind of childhood memory of sitting at my dad's feet watching the last night of the proms, and all I remember was flags waving and a very boisterous atmosphere. So that was the only thing in my head of like, I want to kind of create that kind of mayhem in the Royal Albert Hall. So, I got introduced to Jules. In turn, he works pretty exclusively with the Heritage Orchestra, so I got to meet them. And we, blank sheet of paper, started to plan it. So it actually took 6 months to put it all together, which starts with me kind of picking the music and curating the show, kind of how it was going to flow. Kind of worked out with Jules pretty quickly that I could effectively make it look like I was mixing the orchestra by getting them to continuously blend tracks together, which nobody had really done before. So we worked out the keys, the tempo changes, and kind of lots of edits in terms of the arrangement of the original tracks. And then he really has to do the real deep dive, and he has to start writing out all of the parts for 65 people in the orchestra. So literally pen on parchment. They've got a computer program that does it as well. But and then it's slightly unnerving because obviously this big date, this big appointment's heading closer and closer in the calendar, but I can't hear anything. All I can do is keep going back to the original tracks that I have edited on my computer and keep going back to Jules and saying, are we okay? And he said, yeah, it's going to be fine on the night. But I didn't, so you don't get to hear anything until, because we're not making a record at that stage. So until you can get all the players in the room for a rehearsal, like couple of days before, it didn't really come to life. But as soon as I heard it, I thought, yeah, we're going to be okay. So and then we did the show. Nobody really knew what to expect. But halfway, during the first kind of breakdown of Right Here, Right Now, Fatboy Slim, me and Jules kind of just said, we pre-planned we were going to do this kind of clapping thing. Kind of caught on in the room. All the orchestra stood up, started clapping. The audience stood up, started clapping, and kind of never sat down. So it was a whirlwind kind of 70 minutes, we're all buzzing backstage, and almost immediately it was like, surely this can't be the last or only time we're going to do this, because everyone had so much fun, the orchestra included. And because it was beautifully shot, because it was at the Proms, because it was the BBC, because of the iPlayer, and then the ability people had to obviously put stuff on YouTube, we had a proper, hadn't happened to me before in my life, but we had a proper viral moment where everybody the next day seemed to be talking about it, asking why they weren't there, asking their friends why they, did you see this? And it kind of spread around the world pretty quickly. And originally it had all been done to celebrate 20 years of me taking Radio 1 down to Ibiza for the live broadcast, but after a few days the social media kind of swell turned it into something completely different. And then what happened is we tried to plan to do it again, but it's hard, it all came together because of the Proms, and the Proms made a lot of things easier in terms of like the costing of it and the facilitation of it. So when you then try and take it out of that environment to do it again, it's really damn complicated. So it took about 6 months to work out how we were going to do it. It only kind of worked at scale. Managed to get an arena show booked at the O2, but it wasn't until like December of 16. But we sold it out in a day when I announced it in March, and then we were like scrambling around thinking we got to do a couple more shows. So we ended up with like 3 arenas in December 16, Manchester and Birmingham. And then we thought, well, we've got 6 months, 7 months to wait now until we actually do it. So let's actually make a record. So we went around, tried to get a record deal. A couple of labels interested. Ended up signing to Polydor through Universal, and then we didn't just want to make a live recording, which would have been again the kind of easy option. We wanted to make a proper album, so we got Mark Ralph involved as producer, and we got to record this album, which was an unbelievable experience because I was sitting there in Abbey Road, looking at pictures of the Beatles and George Martin, and we made the album. And then we did the shows, and then we had this whole kind of second wave of this kind of social media viral buzz around what we were doing. And by January the 1st, after we'd done Graham Norton, the album went to #1. So that propelled us into last year, and we ended up taking the show to America, to the Hollywood Bowl, down to Australia, and we ended up doing loads of festivals in the UK. We came to Ireland and did Electric Picnic
in the
rain, which was just brilliant, because that was a good test for us. It was the end of our little festival run, where I think we'd done like 5 or 6 shows, and that was the last date because it fell in like September or whatever. And yeah, following Tribe Called Quest, and then we had this downpour. But actually, it made it better because it was actually something different for us, and the crowd just not one person left, and they just all went crazy. So, and then obviously we really wanted to come. So then last November, December, we do another arena run, but we didn't get to come to Ireland. So it's a great pleasure to be able to come back now on this tour. So yeah, we're going to be in Dublin on the 24th and Belfast on the 25th of November.
So it's our turn, and
it's your turn.
The thing about it, the thing about these tracks, and the thing about that album that you created, that fascinates me, and it fascinates me about dance music and the longevity of dance music, is that my wife and older people above that will love this, but yet my son, who's 6, can sit in the back of the car when my wife's driving, and he's able to sing along the Lola Steen, the shapeshifters that you've curated. Yeah. It's just, surely you have an opinion on that.
Well, I think the other mission for me was, I mean, what I got in my head at an early stage of preparing for the prom was I wanted to, that's like the Royal Albert Hall is a place where traditionally, classic music is celebrated, and obviously a lot of rock and roll's been in there, the Stings and the Phil Collinses and everything, and I wanted to kind of turn it into a kind of celebration of dance music and the kind of legacy of dance music, and give it some real gravitas, and almost like want to punch people in the face and say, you do realize this music's really, really damn important to a couple of generations of people whose it was the soundtrack to people's lives. And I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that dance music doesn't always get talked about in the same way, romantically, as like great rock and roll records, or hip hop records, or punk records, or whatever. So that was the mission. So yeah, I think we kind of proved the point that exactly that it the other interesting thing about the late 80s, 90s clubbing generation that kind of wrote the book on everything that we do today in terms of the way we enjoy the music and the way the clubs were set up in the UK, and the way club culture really was kind of almost created, I think, in the UK and kind of spread around the world, is that that generation, even though if they had kids and got jobs and grew up and got more responsible, they never stopped loving the music. So this was a great way of re-engaging with that audience, because it's an original way of them enjoying the music again, seeing an orchestra play it, and also it finishes at like 11 o'clock at night. So
there's a party afterwards as always.
Well, actually,
even though it's a Sunday night.
What we've seen through the journey of like the first ever gig in like summer 15 to like last Christmas, is that audience getting pretty rowdy again. I got asked a lot on the last tour where the after parties were. So anyway.
But that's what we do, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much for the journey that you've given us so far. Yeah. And I think the journey's going to continue for you. I hope so, because you're brilliant at what you do. Yeah,
we're trying to push the boat out now, and with the second record which we made last summer, we're turning these kind of cover versions into more like eccentric adaptations. For me, the ambition is that these, you're never going to better the original record, but I want these versions to stand alongside and complement the original in a positive way. So on the third album that we're making now, we're going even further, and so we'll see where we end up. It's very exciting.
The legend of Pete Tong continues. The 25th of November, it's going to be at the SSC, Ibiza Classics, with the Heritage Orchestra and Jules Buckley, and this absolute godfather and global ambassador. Incredible. Wow.